Welcome to the Human Condition Foundation. I want to be very clear right out of the gate about what this is and what this is not, because most people are understandably tired of being sold things disguised as answers. This isn't a church. It's not a self-help brand. It's not a motivational platform. It's not a political project. And it's not an academic institution pretending it has final authority. It's something quieter and more difficult. It's an attempt to look honestly at what it means to be human, without reducing people to slogans, diagnoses, doctrines, or identities. Most of us live inside systems we didn't choose. Cultural systems, religious systems, psychological systems, economic systems, narrative systems. And we're usually taught how to perform inside those systems long before we're taught how they actually work. So when life starts to feel heavy, confusing, distorted, or hollow, we assume something is wrong with us. We label it anxiety, or depression, or burnout, or sin, or lack of discipline, or lack of faith, or lack of purpose. We treat these things like separate problems, but they're not. They're expressions of the same underlying reality, the human condition. This foundation exists to map that condition clearly, not morally, not ideologically, not with blame or shame attached. Structurally, what is actually happening inside a human being when things start to feel off? Why people can be functional but exhausted, successful but empty, faithful but brittle, logical but lost. This wasn't planned. It grew out of necessity, out of trying to understand life, our patterns, our failures, our faith, and the human blind spots. The same problem arose over and over. Psychology explained behavior but struggled to explain meaning. Theology spoke about meaning but often ignored how humans actually function. Philosophy asked good questions but rarely gave usable answers. So I started asking a different kind of question. Not what should a human believe, not what a human should do, but how does a human actually work? When you strip away labels, a human being is a system, a living system that processes experience, emotion, interpretation, belief, and choice. And like any system, things don't break randomly. They drift, they distort, they overload, they misalign. The Human Condition Foundation is built around one central idea. Human as experience is not best understood through dualities. Not good versus bad, not believer versus unbeliever, not faith versus reason, not strength versus weakness. Those frameworks collapses complexity into false binaries, and humans don't actually live there. Human experience is triadic. Every experience sits at the intersection of three domains: spirit, matter, meaning. Spirit is orientation, what you're pointed toward, not in a religious sense at first, but in a directional one. Matter is reality, the physical world, the body you inhabit, the constraints of time, biology, and environment. Meaning is interpretation, the story your mind constructs to explain what you feel, see, and experience. When those three align, life feels coherent, even when it's painful, even when it's difficult, even when it's uncertain. When they fall out of alignment, life feels heavy, confusing, disconnected, distorted. This framework doesn't tell people what to think. It helps people see where distortion enters the system. And that's important, because most suffering isn't caused by evil or failure. It's caused by misalignment that goes unrecognized. The foundation operates across several layers, and I want to name those clearly so you understand how all this fits together. First, there is the personal layer, the memoir layer. That's my story. Not because it's exceptional, but because it's honest. It shows how density accumulates over time, how unresolved emotion hardens into meaning, how orientation drifts slowly, not dramatically, and how coherence doesn't arrive through revelation, but through mercy and reorientation. Second, there is the psychological layer. This is where we look at how emotion, cognition, and behavior actually operate as a system. Not a moral weakness, not a pathology by default, but as signal processing. Emotion carries information. Behavior expresses geometry. Patterns persist because systems stabilize, not because people are broken. Understanding this changes how you relate to yourself and others. Shame loses its grip, blame becomes unnecessary, clarity becomes possible. Third, there is the meaning layer. This is where faith enters the conversation, but not as dogma or institutional control. Faith is treated as an operating system, a way humans orient toward light or distortion, toward coherence or collapse. Forgiveness and gratitude are not moral commands here. They are structural forces. They realign orientation. They reduce internal friction. They soften hardened meaning. And finally, there is the metaphysical layer. This is the architecture underneath it all, the geometry of existence itself. Why coherence exists, why dissonance forms, why reality sometimes feels ordered and sometimes chaotic. This layer isn't about mysticism or abstraction. It's about structure, about boundaries, about limits, about what can be known and what must remain undefined. You don't have to accept all of this. You don't need to agree with me. You don't even need to be religious to engage with this work. What I ask is simpler. Stay curious. Stay honest. Stay willing to look beneath surface explanations. This foundation exists to create language where there was confusion, structure where there was shame, clarity where there was noise. We talk to believers and unbelievers in the same room. We critique Christianity without abandoning Christ. We take psychology seriously without reducing humans to machines. We talk about meaning without dissolving into vague spirituality. Everything we do here orbits one goal: coherence, not perfection, not purity, and not performance. Orientation, resonance, mercy. If you've ever felt like life makes sense on paper, but not in your body. If you've ever felt like faith failed you but couldn't name why. If you've ever felt like something was off but everyone told you to be grateful anyway. You're not broken and you're not alone. This is the Human Condition Foundation. We don't promise answers. We promise better questions and the courage to stay with them long enough for clarity to emerge. Thank you.